My name's Sam Stevens. I'm the regional director for a ministry called Alpha in California. I'm originally from England and then Chicago and now LA. So after the rain and the snow, I'm glad to be living in sunny California. I live just 4 miles up the road. And so I want to encourage us about Alpha, and particularly what we're talking about this morning, which is this challenge of how do we share our faith at work. And I'm excited to share with you about Alpha as a practical way for addressing that challenge. A friend of mine, Tamara Kahaloff, was really wrestling with some of what we've been sharing today about work and faith and witness. And she wrote this. She said, rather than view the mission field as only something out there like India, Africa, and the like, the mission field is right where we are today. Our audience is everyone we come into contact with. And what she got a fresh revelation on was that her mission field was her workplace. And for her, that happened to be Disney Studios just up the road in Burbank. And she felt challenged. How do I share my faith? She heard about Alpha because her church, Lake Avenue Church in Pasadena, ran the Alpha course. And so she plucked up a bit of courage and she decided that she would run Alpha right on the Disney studio lot over lunch. And so her and a small team invited a whole bunch of their work colleagues, and they had about a dozen, 15 people show up for this first Alpha. And they just had an amazing time over about 10 weeks, sharing about faith, questions, God, meaning, all these kinds of things. And it just went amazingly well. Tamara got hooked on Alpha. And so what happened was they did that first one, and then the people that enjoyed it then brought their friends for the next one. And so they've been able to run Alpha there right on the Disney studio lot for about 10 years. And she has story after story of people whose lives have been impacted, people who've come to faith. So I want to encourage us this morning that you can use something like Alpha in your workplace. But let me explain what Alpha is, because I'm guessing that there's plenty of people here who have no idea about what Alpha is. And so we like to say that Alpha's an idea. So Alpha came out of a church in London about 20 years ago called Holy Trinity Brompton. They're based right in the heart of the city, and they were wrestling with this question. How do we effectively share the gospel in a post-Christian city where people have no interest in going to church? And out of that conversation emerged this idea to create a space between the church and the culture where people could discuss, ask questions, talk about Christianity in an environment of friendship and acceptance. We also say that Alpha's a story, because everybody's got a story. And on Alpha, what we do is we invite people on a journey. And what's incredible is that as people go on this Alpha journey, through the people that are running Alpha, they experience God's grace, they experience God's love, and we get these incredible testimonies of lives that are transformed. And I thought it'd be cool for us to just watch one of those Alpha stories.
My name is Sabrina and I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I was raised in a Muslim household, and my faith was something that I identified with culturally. I couldn't honestly say that I professed Islam as my faith, and they kicked me out of the family. And when I was taking this Alpha course, it was admitting to myself that Christ came and died for my sins. It meant that there really was no turning back, and I would never have my mom and dad like I was kind of holding on to. No one ever taught me the idea that God loved me. And that was actually the reason why I did have to take the course 4 times, because I would keep asking over and over why people were so sure and why people really believed in this Jesus guy. And it always came down to how much God loved them. And I couldn't get over the idea or come to terms with the idea that there is a God out there that would love someone like me. I lost my family in this entire process, and I gained 100 times more than I ever thought I could. The church has become my family, and the church has become my home.
We say that Alpha's a tool. Jesus said with compassion, he said, "The fields are ripe unto harvest, pray for workers." And as we think about our workplaces, there are literally hundreds, thousands, millions of people that are searching, they're looking for meaning, they're looking for something more out of life. And Alpha becomes a tool that we can invite them to, where they can ask their questions and they can go a little deeper and explore. So the Lord's really blessed Alpha. It started in this one church, was never the intention to run it in any other church, but God just blessed it. And so 24 million people around the world have taken Alpha. It's in 169 countries, and it's used by all the main denominations. And so I just want to tell you briefly how Alpha works, because it's super simple. Alpha runs over 8 to 10 weekly sessions, and there's really 3 parts to an Alpha evening. The first part of every Alpha evening is food. Can we get an amen for food? Yeah, so food just helps people relax, and the real principle behind the food is belonging before believing. So that we're saying to people, we're glad that you've come, you're welcome here with us, we don't care where you're at in your life, what may be happening in your life, how far away from God you may be, what you believe, what you don't believe. We're just really glad that you're here. And so we show extravagant hospitality, and what that communicates is the extravagant love of God to people. So that's the first part. So you have a bit of food together, and then there's a talk. The talks can be done live or on DVD, and the talks cover central aspects of Christianity. They're always the same talks. Who is Jesus? Why did Jesus die? How can I have faith? You can see the subjects that are covered there. And the talks are super interesting, they're engaging, they're fun, and they're accessible for people. And so each week, the talks build on each other. They get a little bit more information, Christian teaching, if you will. And then after the talk, the real heart of Alpha is then the discussion. And so the idea on Alpha is they get the Christian view through the talk, and then in the small group, we want to hear from them. What did you think? How did you feel about what it was that you just heard? And then we do something that's really hard for most Christian leaders, which is then we listen. And listening is incredibly powerful as we just allow a dialogue to take place. And so the small group is based on this idea that evangelism is a process, and that people can only be where they are. And so on Alpha, we're letting them go on a journey. We're giving them some room to ask their questions, to share and to talk and to dialogue. And what happens is, week by week, they begin to move closer toward Christ. So that's what an Alpha evening is. One other key piece to Alpha is about 3/4 of the way through Alpha, there's an Alpha day, or ideally an overnight, sort of like a fun retreat. So the idea is they've made friends, God's begun to work in their life, and you say, hey, we're gonna have this super fun retreat, we're gonna go out to the mountains and just have a great time. And then the teaching on the weekend is on the person and work of the Holy Spirit. And what we do is, we then, partway through the weekend, we invite the guests to be able to receive prayer. It's done super gently, but what happens is they get a chance to respond to what God may have been doing in their life, and we get a chance to pray for them. And so it's many times on this Alpha weekend that people will give their life, surrender their life to Christ, recommit their life, or just experience a fresh touch from God. So that's pretty much how Alpha works. We like to say it's a meal, a talk, and a chat. Super simple. And because of that, you can do it in all kinds of contexts once you get the recipe down. So Alpha's run, as you can see here, it's run in prisons, it's run with youth, it's run on college campuses. And what we're really focused on right now is that it's run in the workplace. And so Alpha has been run in all kinds of different workplace settings. Everything from it's been run at Ford Motor Company on the factory floor. and it's been run at USB Bank. There's a Christian billionaire in Hong Kong who does Alpha, and he does a 7-course meal as the food part of their Alpha, down to running it in a factory with a brown bag lunch. You can do it in all kinds of different ways. And so you can see there, YMCA, gyms, really anywhere where people can work, you can run Alpha. I've got a good friend who's a trader in Chicago, and he's just opened up his boardroom, and now they have about, every time they do Alpha, they have about 80 business guys who gather. Because what happens with Alpha is people have a good experience, and then they bring their friends on the next one, and it grows. So the primary way that Alpha is run is through the local church. So if you've ever been at work and you've thought, man, I really want to take my witness a step further, one of the things that you can do is bring somebody to an Alpha if your church were running it. And so I thought it'd be really cool. I'd like to invite Clark Corver and Julian to come right now. I thought it'd be great for you to hear an actual local testimony from a church right here in LA that have been doing Alpha for a while. And Clark is one of the pastors at Emmanuel Church in Paramount, and Julian took Alpha as a guest. And so they're going to share with you a little bit about the impact that made.
Awesome. Hey, thanks a lot, Sam. Appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. All right. Man, my name's Clark. I've been helping lead the Alpha ministry for going on 4 years at Emmanuel, but our church has been running it for nearly 17 years. And so last night I was doing some just calculations trying to figure out how many people have come through. I'd estimate between 1,200 and 1,500 folks have come through the doors of Emmanuel for Alpha. I don't say that just for the sake of having a number thrown out there, but so that you would see who these people have become. As now many of these people are ushers, elders, deacons in our church, and are leading. They're some of our youth pastors and our youth leaders. So I think it's safe to say that it's transforming the culture at Emmanuel. And so right now as a church, we're trying to create a spiritual pathway where as we come and interact with newcomers at church, we're able to get them plugged into a ministry or a class that meets them right where they're at. And so Alpha is the beginning for many of these people. It's the beginning of their discipleship. They're growing to be the men and women who Jesus created them to be. And so looking back over the course of the last 17 years and hearing stories, these people have come in as atheists, as agnostics, just really angry at the church. They had a bad experience. Many of them are just simply lukewarm, and these people have become our youth leaders. They're training the next generations of believers in the faith. And what's made this work is that our church has bought in. Our church has bought into it. When Alpha's coming around the calendar, they're announcing it, they're promoting it. Alpha has a voice. And that's blessed so many different lives. And this year, I'm encouraging our leaders to take it a step further. So how has Alpha benefited our church? It's benefiting the community. But I've encouraged our leaders to grab millennials. I see many of you young folks out there, 20, 30-something-year-old. I said, we need to train them and raise them up in the faith. I want you to teach them how to facilitate these groups. I want you to train them up in apologetics. How do you share your faith? How do you defend it? Because this is what Alpha is. Alpha is stepping into the ring with the world, saying, we're going to listen to you. We're going to address your questions. We're going to acknowledge that the pain that you have. Just as Jesus entered into the muck, the trenches of life, that's what Alpha is. You sit, you grab dinner, you listen to them, and you hear their questions. It's a great time. And so as we have men's groups, women's groups, we have co-ed groups, couples groups, I'm encouraging our Alpha leaders to take the next step, and I'm challenging them, who are you bringing to Alpha? Who in your workplace, or can you bring Alpha to your workplace, as Sam just mentioned? We're encouraging them to do that. Now, as I mentioned, Alpha is changing the culture of our church, and as we're trying to get people to wrap their minds around this, I reflected on the parable Jesus gave his disciples when he's trying to get them to understand, and it's the parable of the great banquet. He said, go to the highways and the byways and compel them to come in, right? And as he's going, at the end of Matthew, he's about to ascend, he says, I want you to go and make disciples. Now, on Sunday, we have this rah-rah, we get excited, but then once we get to the week and we tell our people to go and invite and evangelize, it's intimidating. It's scary. It's uncomfortable. And so while many people take the invitation to church, some of them struggle to get there, but this is when we present Alpha to them. We say, I want you to come, grab dinner with us. There's no pressure. We're going to address the questions that you're asking. All these people are asking these questions. Is God really up there? How do I talk to him? Do I pray? How do I pray? What does this look like? And basically, our goal is to make them feel you're welcomed here, and we want to hear your questions. It's a safe place. And so my house is right across the street from our church. So as I walk across the street to go to Alpha on Wednesday nights, we bought these smoke poles intentionally so people can smoke their cigarettes in front of church and put their cigarette butts in there. And I walked up to a guy and he said, Pastor Clark, I have a question. I said, what's up? He said, do you think I'm going to go to hell because I smoke? I said, no, man, of course not. It just smells like you've been there. And as we go in there, I look and I see all these people coming in. We have people that have grown up in church and been there their whole life. But they come to Alpha and they say, I met Jesus here. I've been scared to ask my questions. I didn't want people to judge me because I grew up in the Christian home. But it's at Alpha they met Jesus. We have people coming in with their partners. We have transgender folks come in. And it's amazing to me, and my heart breaks for the lifestyle choices that these people are making. But I have so much joy and excitement in my heart that they feel welcomed and loved at Alpha. And our church has bought into it. Our church has bought into it. And so a guest last session told me this, and I'll read you this quote real quick. It says, he said, it's comforting to know I can come to a place where I'm not judged. I can ask any question I'd like. My leaders help guide and direct as we process these questions. I now have a much greater understanding for the Bible and for God's love for me. It doesn't matter what I've done. It doesn't matter where I've been. At Alpha, I'm welcomed as I am. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce my buddy Julian here. Julian came through Alpha a couple years ago with me, and he's going to share a brief testimony. Then we'll hand it back over to Sam. So could you welcome Julian?
Thanks, Clark. Thank you. I became a believer at the age of 27 in prison. I was in prison because I was a drug-addicted, sex-crazed, street-hustling criminal. It was in prison where I first was introduced to Jesus. However, my short 8-month sentence wasn't enough to truly understand who Jesus really is. Needless to say, after 6 months of my release, I was sticking needles in my arm and gambling other people's money. My last run lasted 18 months and nearly cost me my mind. By the grace of God, I was led to Emmanuel and soon after invited to attend Alpha. It was there in Alpha where I began this incredible, life-changing, joy-bringing spiritual journey that I am now on. I felt accepted and welcomed at Alpha. Despite my past, I was able to ask my questions and I began to experience and see the love of Jesus Christ. My group leaders listened to me and helped guide me and direct me and my questions. I remember the moment I truly just began to understand and feel God's love. It was during the Alpha retreat. My leader and I were walking by a river. It was there I truly grasped that the God who created all of this, the birds, the river, the grass, he loves me. Thanks to Alpha, Emmanuel, CR, and by the grace of God, I've been off meth for 19 months. And immediately after Alpha, I got plugged into, thank you. Amen, right? Immediately after Alpha, I got plugged into the choir at church. And I helped lead there. I love singing for the Lord. It's the greatest joy in my life. Thank you. I'm connected to my church activities throughout the week. I believe God used Alpha to really make church feel like home. And he used this ministry to truly kickstart my spiritual journey. Thank you very much for your time. God bless.
Thanks, Clark. Thanks, Julian. So we have a booth out in the lobby. Love to talk to you about Alpha. Love to share with you how you can get it started at your workplace or your church or your home. That would be great. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you about Alpha.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.